And dive right into the crowdfunding. So crowdfunding, the technical definition that we like is the aggregation of capital, typically in small amounts, for large numbers of people, facilitated by the internet. Crowdfunding has been around as long as there has been money and people. The real difference is that the internet, in particular social media, has acted as the lubricant. It's basically turbocharged the activity of raising money because it allows other people to easily share what it is that you're doing and share the links and the information and direct them back to your crowdfunding campaign.
Yes? Just curious, what's the distinction between crowdfunding and crowd raising?
Raising. Okay, the question was, what's the distinction between crowdfunding and crowd raising? That's a very good question because I hadn't heard the term crowd raising used very much. You mean like raising money through crowdfunding?
Yeah, I guess that's because we're using it interchangeably at my organization. I just wanted to know what's sort of proper term.
Yeah, okay, very good question. So really the question is, what's the sort of proper term? The truth is that crowdfunding, crowdsourcing, collaborative consumption, all of these are sort of relatively new terms. And so the space, the nomenclature is still absolutely developing. If you think of it just as engaging with the crowd, and there's multiple ways to engage in the crowd, that's probably the simplest way to look at it. In this instance, we're talking about raising funds from the crowd. Now, those methods, those four main ones that are on the right-hand side, donation, rewards, equity, and lending, those are legal in different ways, in different jurisdictions, in different parts of the world. So even though all four exist, donation being giving classically to an organization, a reward being you give me money and I give you back some kind of specific tangible product or experience or something else, equity being I'll actually give you a portion of my company, a share in my company, literally a security or a claim on future cash flows. And then lending, where you actually, you might lend me money at a certain interest rate for 24 hours and I give it back to you. Lending and equity are legal within the context of the United Kingdom, within Australia. 2 months ago, Italy just passed legislation. However, even though in the States, Obama passed the Jobs Act back last spring, the Security and Exchange Commission, who is the national securities regulator in the US, has not yet ruled on equity-based crowdfunding within the context of the US. Now, what that means for Canada is that we also have not yet ruled on equity and lending, although the Ontario Securities Commission and the Saskatchewan, their Securities Commission, have both indicated that they're moving forward in this direction. So we'll see what ends up happening with that. So I'm going to constrain my comments to rewards, donation, and rewards-based crowdfunding because those are the legal ones. You can ask me about the other ones, but let's stick to what we can actually do within the Canadian context. Usually, crowdfunding falls into these two main categories: keep what you raise, or all or nothing. All or nothing is like Kickstarter would be an example of this. Say you want to raise $100, but you only raise $99. You get to keep nothing, right? So that would be all or nothing. But there can be benefits to all or nothing. It imparts a real sense of urgency, both on your team and also for people who are donating to your campaign. Now, keep what you raise, this is literally where even if you fell $1 short, you'd be able to keep whatever you've raised to that point under your target. The difference is that there's typically a difference in the percentage that the platform takes in terms of these two different categories. I'm just going to quickly poll the audience. How many people here have actually given to a crowdfunding campaign? How many people have said, okay, speaking with pros here. Okay, so good. And how many people have actually run a crowdfunding campaign? Oh, okay, it's only two. Okay, kind of, sort of. Okay, there's a story there. Okay, so you probably saw it. So you guys are familiar with the two different models. What you might not be familiar with is this chart, which breaks down some of the different. Gives you a sense of where that activity is taking place for rewards-based crowdfunding. You want to look probably, since we're all nonprofits, up at the top sort of right-hand corner to see that roughly 20% of all crowdfunding campaigns fall into the category of social causes. It represents a really large percentage of the market. Crowdfunding is growing in leaps and bounds. You may have already heard that crowdfunding last year globally topped out over $2.4 billion. This year is projected to be up above $5 billion. So it's a really substantial amount of money is flowing through crowdfunding. Okay, here is the part you might want to write down. This is really, really key. There's 4 main things that we have seen need to be present in a crowdfunding campaign for it to be successful, regardless of the size of the raise. So the first thing is the quality of your idea and your pitch. So if you have a lousy idea, the great part about crowdfunding is that you will know very quickly because people will either tell you or they won't contribute. So quality of your idea, your pitch is also critically important. You want to be able to do it, deliver it as clearly and concisely as possible. Practice, practice, practice. You want to make sure that you have strong, enticing rewards that are attractive to people. If you're not sure whether or not your rewards are attractive, then you should ask people. It's literally as simple as that. Marketing your campaign is also absolutely critical. What we're seeing is that as campaigns are getting larger in their asks, more people are becoming increasingly savvy about the marketing strategies that they're employing. If you simply build your crowdfunding campaign and you put it up, regardless on which platform you put it on, the data indicates that is absolutely not enough for you to do. You have to tell people about it. In fact, sometimes crowdfunding is referred to as the monetization of your social capital. The majority of the donations will come to your campaign from your existing network. The magic of crowdfunding happens when you break out, when you have people that didn't know about your organization find out about it a bit organically, so it covers it, you get media attention in some way, shape, or form. Other people beyond your network, maybe the network of your networks, come to your campaign and contribute. But unless you do effective marketing, it's not gonna happen. Now, how strong your network is obviously critically important. If I was looking at 2 different crowdfunding campaigns and I was like, which one is going to succeed, and one person, had 10 Facebook friends and the other one had 500, probably that might be an indicator. But really, I would encourage you to look at your network holistically to say, look at all of the different networks that you're a part of and tap into some of those non-traditional ones. Because they can really help boost your campaign as well. So those 4 factors are almost always universally present within the different successful crowdfunding campaigns. And that doesn't matter if you're nonprofit, for-profit, those are really the key. There's a number of different kinds of rewards that you can offer. Recognition, where you give a shout out to someone. You can imagine, just last week we were doing a workshop. We had like 12 15 people in the audience for our workshop. We were talking about rewards. We talked about the recognition. I made a joke how, wouldn't it be great if, you had got recognition, you had someone do a Twitter shout out, and it happened to be to 40 million people, and one of the people in the room, they have a connection to none other than actually, I shouldn't say the name, but it's a very famous pop star, a young man who has gotten in trouble quite a bit. And they had a connection to him, and so they had a possibility of being able to leverage that connection to be able to send out a recognition, a tweet of recognition. So they're capitalizing on their personal network in order to give something that would be literally of value. I would like to have a famous person tweet out my name, preferably with something flattering to say. So lots of different things that you can look at. The average reward is typically $25. You want to make sure that you have a reward at that level. Most of the amount of money, the maximum volume usually comes in around the $100 level. The key is, it doesn't matter, you don't have to cover off all these different rewards. The important thing is that you're offering rewards that are structured and connected with your particular campaign and that are unique and novel in a particular way. So, does that make sense for those rewards? Does that, read off? Okay. So the tricky part as a not-for-profit is, how do you create value when you're a not-for-profit, right? Often you have a social mission or a particular mission you're trying to employ, and so you say, well, what is it that I can do that can fit into these different categories? And I'd say the primary answer is get creative. And that might sound a bit trite, but it's quite often it is absolutely true. If you take a look at some of the most successful crowdfunding campaigns, they often have some kind of really creative element. So they've broken outside of the box, they've offered something novel. Renee's going to talk about some of the key novel things that I tried to get in on the most novel reward and that it got sold out before I did. I was very sad about that one. But anyhow, so you really want to get as creative as possible for those different rewards. Okay, a lot of people also ask, well, why am I going to crowdfund? When you find out about what's involved and you find out that it's actually a lot of work, well, what's the point of doing it? Well, first and foremost, it can give access to capital for many people and many organizations that wouldn't ordinarily have access to it. So for example, we know that if we look, the Kauffman Foundation out of the United States tells us that of venture capital funding, only 4 to 6% of that funding gets allocated to women-owned businesses. It's a very, very small number. Our data tells us that for crowdfunding campaigns, over 30% of them are run by women. So we know that women are engaging with this tool very, very effectively. We also know, for example, that teens, young people, are engaging with crowdfunding as well, who may not actually have access to a credit card or might have trouble securing bank debt or can't put a second mortgage on the house. So, getting access to funds is definitely the first really important part. Having said that, marketing and promotion can be just as important as the funds that you're raising. In fact, for many organizations, breaking out of their existing donor base that may be experiencing donor fatigue can be just as valuable. Building that donor list, getting additional press coverage, doing something novel and different that differentiates you from other nonprofits or charities in the space can be really, really critical as well. Market validation is key. Say you're trying something new, you want to do an experiment, you don't want to risk the organization's capital, you want to do it in a way that's engaging with the public. This can be a great way because if people think that it's a great idea, they will support it and they'll actually share it as well. Connecting with your audience or your customers. Crowdfunding and crowdsourcing, you can think of it like a dialogue that you're having with people. This is a real opportunity to engage with people, to find out what they think, to gather their input and co-create value dynamically on the fly with them as well. So connecting with your audience, that can be an important role as well. So lots of different reasons. When people think about crowdfunding, there's tons of different crowdfunding platforms, somewhere between at least 600 to 800 crowdfunding platforms globally. Sorry, public. Let's just, there we go. So we have over 600 to 800 crowdfunding platforms globally. There are many different kinds. Many of them are focused on specific niches, like Catalyst is focused on making the world a better place. Having said that, you can go beyond, you can engage with the platform, and you can also go beyond the platform. So there are pros and cons to both of those things. I'd be happy to talk with any of you afterwards for your organizations about that as well. This was an example I really like. The Oculus Rift, this was an example of a crowdfunding platform or crowdfunding campaign where someone, a young man, an enthusiast, wanted to create virtual reality goggles, started in his garage, literally trying to raise a small amount of money. I think it was, $250,000, still substantial, but not that much considering how much he was able to raise. What was amazing about this was he was really taking a chance to gain capital, got an industry spokesperson or an industry heavyweight to endorse his campaign, and was able to really be one of these different successful outliers. And I say outlier because the vast majority of crowdfunding campaigns do not raise $2.5 million. In fact, the majority of crowdfunding campaigns raise somewhere between $4,000 to $6,000. Having said that, you have the possibility with a crowdfunding campaign that what you are doing is so novel or so interesting to the public that it breaks out, that it goes viral, and that you attract substantially more money than you raise, than you were planning on raising. So you don't know how much traction there is going to be until you put it out there in the world. And that is a really important thing with crowdfunding. There have been people who have raised really substantial amounts of money and have been surprised about it because by the very nature of it being out there as well. I'm going to, so this was an example of a story that really caught on. A lot of people heard about the bus lady last year. They raised quite a bit of money, over $700,000 for this crowdfunding campaign. Now, can anyone tell me why do you think this campaign raised so much money? Anyone? Yeah, gentlemen?
I think she was bullying, and bullying is a hot subject right now, and she dealt with it in such a ethically perfect way.
Yeah, so the woman who was bullied, you said a couple things. Not only did she deal with it well, but but people, he said it was a hot topic. So I'm going to infer from that, people were interested, they were dialoguing about this topic, and they could connect with this topic. They could connect with it. So when you're building a crowdfunding campaign, you want to tell a story, and you want to do it in a way that people are able to connect with. The story that you tell is just as important as what you are doing. Okay, so the story. Yeah, John, we're here.
Will you link to the story?
Sorry.
Link to the story?
Okay, so link to the story. When you're doing a crowdfunding, when you're doing a crowdfunding video, you want to make sure that that video is going to be under 3 minutes in length, and that's a really important thing. That's where most of them are. Sweet spot, people tune out outside of that. Good question. Okay. All right. Oh yeah, I did have that. Tell your story. Okay, so very, very important. Terry O'Reilly. We were just presenting at a conference in New York region on Friday and on Saturday this past week. Terry O'Reilly from the CBC, he was giving a talk just before us. He had two excellent quotes. He said, "Stories add meaning, and meaning ignites action." That really resonated with us with regard to crowdfunding, because stories are what people connect to. They want to connect to you, the individuals within your organization as well. They want to find out what you're doing, why you were doing what you're doing, what it is that you're all about, and you want people to feel your message. So you've heard about, in other forms of consumerism, about being emotionally driven. You should capitalize on that. That sounds a bit, crass, but what I mean is you want people to connect on an emotional level with your story. That will help to motivate their actions. Okay, so why are people going to back you? They're going to back you because you have really good rewards, because they share the passion that you have with your particular subject. They may want to be a part of what it is that you're doing. They may want to participate, or they simply maybe kindred spirits for your cause. There's lots of different motivations. The key thing is to think about in advance why someone is engaging with your particular audience. If your organization has been around for some time, you might be able to do that work and brainstorm that in advance. How are you going to get the word out around your crowdfunding campaign? You're going to do that through a variety of different channels. The most important thing, rather than this specific list, is to plan and make sure that you're going to plan in advance. You want to do most of your work in advance of your particular crowdfunding campaign. And as you're doing your planning, as you're doing your messaging, you want to, as much as possible, test and iterate your messages. You want to put it out there and be like, hey, this is what I'm thinking you're doing. Well, what do you think? And if people are like, then maybe not so much, right? So you have to try it out with different audiences and test and iterate your message. It is hard to get to the place where you really have something, where you really have the value, but you only get there through polishing, testing, and iterating on your campaign. So we have a number of different workshops. Bit.ly /CSI Catalyst will take you there. We offer those workshops. There are two different ones. So we have campaign design, campaign and marketing, campaign marketing. And we're happy to have any of you attend those different workshops. But more importantly, now is a good time for us to open up the floor to questions. Or do you want to, should we jump? I don't know where Tierney went. Should we do you want to do questions? Yeah, questions, and then.
Yeah, no, why don't you take some questions? Yeah. So,
all right, sounds good.
You got it.
Okay, there were like 3 different ones. Okay, you already answered one, so we'll take this one here in the front first. Yeah.
Hi, thank you for this. Thanks very much. Is there an advantage of using or concentrating on one platform as opposed to using many, or is there a successful combination?
Good question. Should you concentrate on one platform or should you use many platforms? All the data says you should focus your campaign on one platform. Breaking up your campaign on multiple platforms generally just means that you're breaking up your own audience, the eyeballs and attention. You want to keep it as focused as possible. There's nothing stopping you from running the same campaign on multiple platforms, but all of the data and all of the research shows that generally speaking it doesn't work. It really doesn't work. So I encourage you not to do that. Yeah, good question. Okay, there's a question in front. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just wondering about that. I think there's virtual reality goggles.
Yes.
You're saying the goal was like 250,000, and then it ended up being something like 2 million.
Yes.
What does it take for people to go above and beyond that goal? Like once they see the person's met the amount, like why are they continuing to support it?
Yeah, very good question. So the question was, I guess sort of 2 parts. One, how do you break out from past your goal? And then number 2, why do people continue to support over and above the particular goal? So that particular campaign, I'll answer the second part first, why people continue to donate. They were getting something that was really of value to them. So the thing that they were getting was they were getting a developer kit of these virtual reality goggles. So you were getting a product that wasn't available anywhere else, right? So there was scarcity, that had a limited time. They weren't, I think they actually had a limited, there's actually a limited number at one point. It was a novel technology, and so it was something that people really valued a lot. So they continue to do it almost in that pre-purchase, pre-buy mechanism. Now when you hear that, you think, oh well, that's not us, so we can't do that. But that's not the important part to anchor on. The important part to anchor on is they created something of value that people wanted, so there was a lot of demand there, and they were able to continue to capture value, make that total go up by offering that reward. Now, how did they actually break out? That particular example, they got huge media attention because a gentleman by the name of John Carmack, who's an industry heavyweight in the video game industry, came out and endorsed the product. He's the gentleman who created Wolfenstein 3D or Doom or Quake. These are video games which have created literally billions of dollars of value by basically inventing the first-person shooter genre for video games. And what that meant was that he was like, the senior person in the entire industry who said, this is legitimate, this is the real deal, and that really set it on fire. So you can see that the power of influence, if you have someone really noteworthy who's able to come along and be like, this is a campaign that is worth supporting, that might not cost you anything, it might cost you relationship capital, but that can really make a material difference in your campaign and in your donations. We're living in the reputation economy, and so those people who have clout and reputations can lend them to your campaign. Okay, so your question. Yeah.
If you built a list of emails and you really don't have permission to use them, but
Yeah.
can you hit them with this crowdfunding thing?
Okay, yeah. The question was, what if you happen to build a list of emails, and could you hit them with your crowdfunding campaign? I would encourage you not to do that. There is in Canada the Can-Spam Act. Can-Spam Act that I think governs the use of around emails and unsolicited emails for commercial purposes. So I wouldn't encourage you, or I encourage you to look at that first before you take any action. But generally speaking, you want to ask people to share your particular campaign. The magic is in the sharing, where you get people they think either what you're doing is so good or so novel, or you create so much value that they'll share.
Sir, real quick. If they're in your industry, though, can you use them then?
I would say if you have, the question is if they were in your industry, the emails that you have on this list, could you use them then? I would say if you have people that you have a connection with, that they are in your personal network, that you already have permission to contact them, then I would say you are welcome to do that. I would say if you are unsure at all, then I would err on the side of caution. You really don't want to burn your connections. Yeah, question?
I'm just wondering if you know of any examples, or whether you think it would be a good idea for a smaller version of a crowdsourcing campaign to fund the sort of work that might be needed to go into a larger crowdsourcing campaign.
So the question was whether or not you should use a crowdfunding campaign to fund some of the work that would go into a larger crowdsourcing campaign. What's really neat about a crowdfunding campaign, let's use an example. Can you give me an example of a favorite crowdfunding campaign that they had? Favorite crowdfunding campaign that they thought was really novel, interesting, or good?
Some video.
Okay, maybe not. Okay, video. Okay.
I can give an example.
Okay, sure. An example.
It was called Above and Beyond, and it was this guy that was teaching somebody who really wanted to learn how to fly, how to parasail, so that he could eventually start a school for children to learn how to do the same.
Okay, fantastic. So, the crowdfunding example was for a gentleman who needed money to start to learn how to parasail, so that he would be able to start his own school to be able to teach children how to do this activity. Parasailing is an amazing activity, really cool. So, what was neat about that was when you were explaining it, you told me the story about it, right? You remembered the story, you connected to the particular story. If this gentleman had one part of that. Maybe his first part was, he said, my dream is to start opening up the school, but the first step is I need to raise $5,000 to learn how to parasail, right? What's great about that is he would then have the opportunity to do that, say he raises that successfully. And then, once he's done that successful raise, he then gets to go and do the thing that he wanted to raise the money for. If he was savvy, he would record this particular process, and then he would let his supporters in on what he was doing, on what was happening, right? So he would continue to engage with those people and bring them on this journey with him, and he would talk about, you know, the milestones that he met, the transformations that he has, why, how this has reshaped his view of teaching kids how to parasail, where the value is, all of that. And so now what he would have is he wouldn't ordinarily have his initial campaign that he could point back to and say, hey, look, I have traction here, I have market validation, people supported me, I raised this money. But now I've gone and done this, and look at where this has brought me. And now I need your support after being on this journey to tackle this next milestone. And that can be really, really engaging because people come along on that journey with you, they connect with your campaign, and you snowball. You build one success upon another. So are we seeing that? Yes, absolutely we are seeing people and organizations come back to crowdfunding time and again. Good question. Yeah.
Yeah, just wondering how to design how to get the limit of the time that people crowdfund.
Yes.
And is there anything about the best duration, like 30 days or something like that?
Yeah, very good question. The question is about the length of the crowdfunding campaign. How do you determine how long you should go? Even though some crowdfunding campaigns, will go to 60 or 65 days, it's actually the longer the campaign is actually negatively correlated with success. So the sweet spot seems to be somewhere around 35 days, 35 days. You can go longer. Most campaigns, though, that go longer, that doesn't generally have an impact on whether or not they're successful or not. You got to think, if people really like what you're doing, will a couple extra days, 5-10 days, actually encourage them to give or not? Generally not. If they like you and they like what you're doing, then they'll connect, and then you can convert them. Otherwise, the extra time doesn't generally help. Good question. Questions from the chat.
Actually, that
Was the same question from the chat. We have a psychic internet connection. Very good. There's a question in the back. Yeah. Very good. Yeah.
Yeah, just thinking of great success. If you actually go over what you need for what you put your source for, what do? Are you able to use the funds further? It's not like fundraising. If you go over, you have to use it for the purpose that you asked people to get it to you for.
Yeah, this is a very good question. The question is, if you blow past your target and you have all this extra money, what do? Do you have to commit it towards the purpose, or how does that function work? As it is a donation, currently for donation rewards-based crowdfunding, people are giving you the money. So literally you can use those funds where you see fit. What we encourage our campaigners to do is to be as transparent as possible as what they will do if they go past their target. And the earlier you can be transparent about that, the better, because you never know. That thing that you say our stretch goal is, people might be like, yeah, that's really what I want to see have happen. And then and we'll continue to donate past that. The key part is for you to be as transparent as possible and to be as upfront as possible. I used the term earlier, the reputation economy. We are living in the reputation economy. What you do with that funds, it will come to light, and people will judge you for it, and they'll either continue to support you or might be very upset with you. So that would be my guidance. Good question. Okay, there's a question just in front of us.
Yeah, one of the slides you kind of mentioned several of the platforms that are out there.
Yes.
And the typical, or the range, I guess, of the contribution margin they were asking for, between 2% and 9%.
Right.
So I'm just curious as to what, in your research, what you've come across, what would make, in this case, I guess, a nonprofit say, okay, I'll go for the platform that's going to charge 9% versus 2%.
Yes, yeah, very good question. So the question is, what would make a nonprofit or other organization choose to go with one platform versus another, and by extension, pay the fees of ranging from 2% to 9%? Why pay higher fees? Pardon me, I guess would be also at the root of the question. And what we find is that just as we said, your customers, your clients have different set of value drivers, so do you as an organization. So what we find with Catalyst, even though we're a smaller platform, we're doing well, we've got traction, now we're one of the top 5 sites in Canada. But having said that, what we offer is additional support to our campaigns. So we not only offer regular workshops for people to attend, those are advanced workshops but we offer weekly one-on-one sessions. We also offer every other week a workshop for our campaigns to come to where they can get help on any aspect of their campaign. So what people have told us is they appreciate the additional support that they're able to get. Having said that, other platforms for another organization having a super low fee structure, that might be the thing that is most attractive to them. For other ones, they say, well, you know what, I'm a medical nonprofit, so maybe I want to go on MedStarter where there is other campaigns that are of medical nature that are on there. So it's usually a multifaceted decision. What I would say is to do what you're doing. Think about, okay, well, what's important to me as an organization? What do I need in terms of what's important to you?
Thanks.
Okay, who's question? Yeah.
Chris, you mentioned most of your funding comes from primary and secondary network sources. Is there a portion that comes from just people finding you on the web? So is there an advantage to doing search engine optimization and listings? And what portion of that do you think that might fit into your funding model? Yes,
yeah. Question is it advantageous to do search engine optimization or to engage in sort of maybe secondary marketing approaches?
Sure, beyond your immediate network.
Beyond your immediate network in order to bring traffic to your campaign. We are increasingly seeing campaigns, particularly those of larger raise or larger nature, engage in some of these other different techniques in order to try to drive traffic and get attention. Probably the most valuable way for you to do that is most within reach, is to try to tap in to those existing communities that are relevant to your nonprofit. So, for example, I am very supportive of the environment. I read treehugger.com. Treehugger.com has a massive readership. Probably lots of people. Are there any environmentally focused nonprofits in the room? Okay, so there's already that's just happened to be yours as well. So that would be an example of saying, if I could get my crowdfunding campaign, if it's noteworthy enough, if I could get it featured on treehugger.com or get someone to write about it, that would be massive because I would suddenly get exposure to literally tens of thousands of people who think similarly or think about what I'm doing. So that would be an easy way that would be marketing focused, but within reach, that wouldn't cost you money, it would just take effort in order to try and get that additional coverage. But those other tools, people are exploring them. I would say they're worthwhile looking at. Depends on your raise, depends on the strength of your network, and best to be done in a savvy way. If you have a big raise, good to engage with a PR agency in order to help you with that process and so on. Okay, so probably good if we have a chance to hear from Whelena because she did a bunch of things right in her crowdfunding campaign. So.
Whelena, and I'm from not far from the trade. Just a little bit about me. I'm a marketing and strategy consultant. I was volunteering with Not Far From the Trade because I really believe in their mission. And I'm here to talk about our crowdfunding campaign that we ran quite successfully on the Catalyst platform earlier this summer. So first, I've got to do it because we're not for profit. We got to talk about what we do. So I'll tell you a little bit about what Not Far From the Tree does, for those of you who haven't heard about what we do. Essentially, what we do is we save Toronto's fruit. We go around and people in various neighborhoods will actually register their fruit trees that are in their backyards or in their front yards, and they've got all this fruit, and they go, every year I put it in my compost bin. Let's do something else with it. So what we do is we get a bunch of volunteers out, and they will pick the fruit from the tree, and that fruit is then shared with the volunteers, the homeowners, and a local social service agency. So it is a win-win-win on multiple levels. We've got lots of engagement. We've been in existence since 2008, and every year our harvest has been growing and growing. I believe this year we're how many?
20,000 pounds.
Wow.
20,000 pounds of fruit was picked this year. That's a lot of fruit. I've been on some fruit picks, and it's astonishing how much fruit is just in one pick. And, so it's quite impressive. So that's a little bit about what we do. So now we'll talk to the stuff that you really care about, which is the crowdfunding. So why crowdfunding? Why did Not Far From the Tree decide to do crowdfunding? Well, we have a really strong existing audience, a very strong existing online audience, which is very important for crowdfunding because if you have a bunch of mailing lists, it's really hard to get people, well, I've got a letter, so I'm going to go to my computer and I'm going to go to this website. People aren't likely to do that. but not far from the tree, has a really strong Twitter following, a really strong Facebook following, a very large existing mailing list, as well as a volunteer list. So we have a very strong background. We need money. We're not for profit. I'm sure everybody here in this room is probably here because we need money. I think this might be a good way of getting it. Well, that was one of the reasons why we decided to do it. And also excited. People get a little excited about a crowdfunding campaign. It's still a new buzzword, and they're just like, oh, you're doing crowdfunding. What? I heard about that. What is that? And there's that buzz around it, and we wanted to tap into that. And not only did we want to tap into excitement about the crowdfunding and us, but also we planned this in terms of timing to be the beginning of our season. So we wanted 2013 people to get people excited about the upcoming picking season, so we could get more volunteers and more trees registered, so we could save more fruit. So those are sort of the main high-level reasons why we decided to do the crowdfunding campaign. So quickly, how did we do? I was mistaken because our goal was actually 4,000 and we raised over 6,000. So we did remarkably well, which was good. We had a total of 145 donors, which we were quite happy with, and the campaign duration was 30 days. And as the person who ran the campaign, I'm really glad it was only 30 days. I recently saw something for they're going to be running a 100-day campaign, and I was just like, oh, I hate running that campaign. 30 days is more than enough for the work that you're going to be doing in the campaign. If you want to do more, you can, but make sure you got a lot of alcohol or something. Yeah.
Just a quick question. What was your conversion rate then? You have 145 donors. What was the total amount of contacts you had?
Oh, I'm not sure. We
Did well for that.
yeah. Oh, definitely. I mean, that was like we had over 1,000 on Twitter, so.
So 10%-ish.
Probably, yeah. We had pretty good conversion rate. Sorry, I should have included that because that was actually one of the documents. I don't have that number in my head, but we did pretty well, and that has to do with our existing audience because we've had a very strong existing engaged audience. All right, so what worked for us? Lots and lots and lots of communication. I cannot stress how much communication we did. And I was tweeting, I was putting on Facebook, we were blogging, we were sending emails, personal emails, we were sending in our newsletters. We were communicating to in every way and every time we could, telling people about this program, what we were doing, why we were doing it, and how to donate. One thing that was my lifesaver, and I'm sure many of you are aware of it, was Hootsuite. So instead of me being hooked to the computer every day, or 24 hours a day, I was able to, at the beginning of the day, and a couple hours devoted every day, and I'm talking weekends, every day to putting the message out. I was able to just put my message out there, and it would just be delivered on at various points during the day, which was important because different people are going to be looking at your different forms of contacts at different times. So you want to make sure that you're constantly delivering things. And then another element of the communication was I mixed up the message that I was giving, and I'll get to the rewards on my next slide. But instead of just saying, hey, we've got a crowdfunding campaign, I was saying, hey, do you want a tote bag? You can do this, or do you want to go on a pick? I was changing the message. I was including different audiences the message would appeal to. So ensuring that I was linking into their the networks, like the tote bag was done by a graphic designer he won an award. So I made sure that was part of, like I mentioned that in the communications. So that people were searching for him, they might come up like, hey, I can get a $20 piece of his art, and he's winning, the Governor of Ontario award. That's pretty cool. So trying to engage on multiple levels of tying in with the reports, because people get sick, I'm sure, of hearing the same thing over and over again. So you want to make sure you're diversifying it. So the communication, very key. We had, I think, a pretty amazing slew of rewards, although there was some. I could have also put rewards into some of the things we might do differently, but I put it in positive just because I like to think that it's positive. As you can see, there's a range of price points for people, which was really good because some people obviously don't have that much money, but they wanted to give something and they wanted to get something from their gift. We did a lot of experiential things, which is a good thing for a not-for-profit because the physical things are a bit challenging. Physical things tend to cost money, and it's not for profit, you have to raise money, so that initial outlay is obviously something to challenge. The whole campaign actually culminated in the season launch party, so the whole thing was ending in that event. So that was it was an interesting idea because we were able to cross-communicate. And then some of the higher level rewards that we had, which was the picks and the beer, really leveraged what we do. So we actually tied into what Not Far From the Tree does. So if you wanted to, people may not have actually had an experience with Not Far From the Tree. This is a way that not only can you give and help us move forward, you can actually experience why people get excited about Not Far From the Tree, why it's important.
Did you put limits on any of those?
Oh, yes. There are definitely limits. The lower level ones, not as many, obviously. But the higher level, we had, like the Bellwoods, we actually had to go back to Bellwoods and get more spots because it sold like that, which was sold out, which was fantastic. We were just like, whoa, this is amazing. And we were able to add another couple of spots on the back. And another thing I did with the rewards, which helped again with my communication, because when you've got 30 days of communicating, anything that'll give a little bit of spice to things is important. We actually introduced some of the rewards at different stages into the campaign, which was a good way of generating some renewed interest into it. Because if you're already following on our Facebook or our tweets, and you're just, oh yeah, there's the campaign. I don't care about any of those rewards. They don't interest me. Well, the Bellwoods one, for example, was introduced later on. It was about halfway through the campaign, and people obviously perked up. They're like, hey, I wanted to give, but none of that appealed. But the Bellwoods are like, I can get some free cherry. I can get some cherry beer that made from cherries. Like, hey, that's pretty cool. Yes.
Any multiple donations?
So
they donated once, and then
Generally, it was unique. There were maybe one or two multiple ones, but typically there were probably I'd say there were only 2 people that donated twice. Everyone else was pretty unique. So you have a question?
Who were your celebrities?
We had Jen Keesmith, who was the city planner, David Miller, he went really quickly, and Damien Abraham, who is the lead singer of Fucked Up. And that would be, when I'll talk a little bit about some of the negatives of the report. Not to say that Damien was negative, he was a fantastic, wonderful person, but that's when you get to know your audience. I think somebody else had a question as well.
Yeah, just a quick logistics question. When did you send out these, or did you send out these rewards? And if so, how? I mean, mailing is expensive. People come pick them up, and how do you manage that?
It's actually still slowly being managed on some of those, and it's a very good point because you can come up with these great ideas, but then you actually have to deliver them. So the season launch was great because a lot of people bought tickets. I think we had 50 ticket sales or something. So we didn't have to deliver anything. They just had to show up. If they didn't show up, well, it was a launch party. You missed it, which was pretty. So that was a nice, easy reward to deal with. The tote bags, we actually delivered the majority of those via bike, which we have already existing in our network. So, and I believe we mailed some as well to people who were a little bit further afield. The fruit picks, those ones people had dates for which to select from. So it wasn't just any pick, any time. We said, these are the picks, and then we made sure to slot them in as availability. The same thing with the celebrity pick. That was the date it was happening, so that redemption has to be based on that event. And the same thing with the Bellwoods charity. This was the date that your prize will be happening at. So did that?
Yes, thanks.
Yeah. So there's a lot of background in terms of ensuring that everything is delivered. That is very important. Now, in terms of there was a lot of positive about our rewards, but as I mentioned, there were also some potential negatives. And I alluded to the Damien Abraham. He was wonderful. He's a fantastic supporter. Unfortunately, his audience, I think, are a lot of 15-year-old boys. And we had hoped to broaden our reach by trying to tap into this new market. It was fairly challenging. We were able to fill his picks because we did a lot of work and a lot of promotion, but it was a lot harder than we thought because we were just like, Fucked Up's pretty cool. They won the Pulitzer Prize, or we'll tap into a different audience. It's hard to tap into a different audience, and relying on your rewards to bring a different audience to you is a bit of a challenging strategy. I'm not saying you can't do it, but it's something that you should be aware of. The other rewards that went a lot better were the ones that were sort of existing, where we're tapping into our existing audience's needs and desires. Those went fairly quickly. People liked them. They resonated very well. The beer, we probably did pick get some new people in there because it was different. But they were already sort of in the food movement because if you like the local crafted beer, local foods, not too much of a stretch from where your existing interests lie. So what else did we do well? We did high level involvement. And what I mean by that is, it wasn't just me doing this. I mean, I was doing a lot of the work, but everybody in the organization was involved in this. Everybody knew that it was happening, right up to the very top of the steering committee. They were sending emails out, they were retweeting, they were contacting all sorts of people all the time. All of the staff members were doing it, the volunteers were doing it, people were tapping into their friends and family. We engaged our partners, so some of the social service agencies that we donated things to were also promoting our event, or promoting the campaign. We had a lot of involvement in our network, and they were pushing it, it wasn't just me, and that was hugely important. So, what would change? Well, we were successful so I mean, you're thinking, well, why would you change anything? As I'm sure a lot of you are like, you've run a lot of campaigns that may have looked good on paper, but there's obviously places that we would change things. So, more upfront time. Planning. This campaign, I literally started, I ran into back at an event, they mentioned they wanted to do this, and I was like, hey, that's great, I'm in, I'll help out. And they were like, we're gonna start this in a month, and I was like, what? We did, we started it in a month, and it was stressful. Obviously it worked, however, the importance of the upfront planning time, I cannot stress. Making a movie, even though you can do it with your phone, making a movie that's going to engage people is very challenging. You want to make sure that your message is clear, that your video is something that you want to be promoting to your entire network. And we were able to come up with something that we were happy and pleased with. But if we'd had more time, we probably would have been able to come up with something much better, because we had great, brilliant ideas, and then when we look at, well, yeah, we don't have the time to do any of that. So we were able to create something that did the job, and did it obviously well enough for us to surpass our goal. But if we had more time, who knows what we could have potentially achieved. And then the upfront time also would have been used to pre-write a lot of the blog posts when we're talking about the rewards, so that we kind of had those in the queue ready when we wanted to just release things at different times in the campaign, instead of saying, oh, we should write this. Because I actually came up with a schedule, and we knew that we needed to write them, but actually having them written ahead of time would make things a lot easier. Because obviously, the crowdfunding campaign is not the only thing going on in the organization. I was shocked that was the case, but I was told that there was a lot of other stuff going on, and they couldn't just do everything I wanted to do when I wanted it done. Although everybody did an admirable job of getting the message out, but that's something that's very important. So the more upfront time you have, the less of an impact it's going to have when you're running the campaign on all the other things that your organization is also having to do at the same time. Because if it's done ahead of time, it's easier. Yes?
How much time would you suggest after your experience? How far out would you start?
Can you repeat the question? Oh, sorry. The question is, how far out would you suggest planning? It would also, there's no real solid answer, but I would probably say 3 months would have been good, because the creation of the video, that takes a lot of time, and you want to have a lot of people's input, because you want it to, this is representing your organization. If you're an individual, it's a little bit different, but if it's an organization, you want to make sure that it's representing the organization, and trying to get what that would be can be very challenging, as well as just getting all the other things that the organization is doing aligned, so that your communications aren't competing with each other. Because one of the challenges that we had, we were launching this at the same time as our season was starting. So we were trying to call volunteers and get new volunteers in, and we're also trying to do the crowdfunding campaign. We were able to balance it, but we probably could have balanced it better. And that's one of the things, I mean, everybody who are not-for-profits around in this room, staff, you don't have a lot of staff. You don't want to be stretched that thin. So you want to make sure that your messages, when they're going out, are not competing with themselves. And so that's one thing with you, when you have more upfront time to plan, you can ensure that that's done properly.
Once you had your ideal 3 months lead-up time, how much time per day would you say, like you're the communications person who's got to get the tweets out, the blog posts out, etc. How much time per day would that take of your time?
I was spending, oh, sorry, the question was how much time per day during the campaign I spent. I spent probably 2 to 3 hours.
2 to 3 hours. Every day, including weekends? Okay.
Some weekends I wasn't quite as in doing that, and I would actually use the Hootsuite a little bit, so I would, but for the most part, yes, it was a lot. And other members of the team also were working on it as well, so it wasn't just my time. And then there's a lot of time after to do the reward redemption that we're speaking of as well.
That's really in line with what we hear campaigns doing. In fact, some campaigns we've heard actually dedicating more time than that, 3 to 5 hours a day. So and this is where the difference between having a single person running a campaign or having a team running a campaign, it can really make a big difference as well, because it's hard to sustain the required pace of the campaign throughout that entire thing.
Sorry, to build on that answer, what's happening during that 2 to 3 hours? Are you actually developing your copy for your tweets and for your Facebook page? Is that how the time is being used?
Yeah, so the question was how was I using my time? And it was developing a lot of that content. It was also following up with donors. What I was actually doing was sending thank you notes to those who had given to us, because part of it was, I mean, one of the nice things about a crowdfunding campaign is you can get that personal touch when you're dealing with the smaller numbers, and that personal thank you, and and for our organization, it's like that personal touch I think was greatly appreciated, but that takes a lot of time. When people are giving their money, and they like to be acknowledged that, hey, it's not just some blank machine, but there's actually an organization that has caring people behind it, and so doing that personal touch is important, but it does definitely add to the amount of work and time that you're using.
Yeah, one question is that while you are doing the crowdfunding, you are also inviting more volunteers to come, right? So how to manage that, the kind of crowd laboring and crowdfunding at the same time? And I guess some people may like to do both of them, and some choose one category. And how do you manage that?
So I believe you're asking how we manage the multiple messages that we were doing at the same time, because I was focusing on the crowdfunding message, but as I was saying, the organization was also calling out for volunteers and starting a new season and doing all the communications around that. And balancing when those messages went out. The nice thing is you can see what other people are tweeting and posting, so I would ensure that if something had just gone up, I wouldn't post something to overrule that. We planned on when we were having our newsletters, kind of coincide a little bit more closely to what my needs were for the crowdfunding campaign than necessarily the needs were for the organization for the volunteering. But the season we had, it wasn't a big detriment, but it just meant you had to make sure you're communicating with other members of the team, so that there wasn't that overlap. People weren't included for volunteering if they engaged in the crowdfunding campaign or either or. But we wanted to ensure that there was a balance between the messages that were being put out there, that it wasn't all at once for our audience, because for us it makes sense, but for people externally, you want to make sure that it's more of a consistent front.
So for the volunteer, this question might not be related to the crowdfunding, but for the volunteer, is there any platform that similar like crowdfunding website?
Is there a platform that you can get volunteers from?
Yes.
That, I'm not sure, though there may be people in the room that know the answer to that question.
So the very good question about are there platforms where you can recruit volunteers? If you, what we see many organizations doing, and the really good strategy, is to try to do that call for volunteers in advance of your campaign. Mm-hmm. So most organizations have people that are going to be interested in helping and supporting in some way. And so the earlier that you can let them know that you're going to be doing a campaign, and the earlier that you can marshal those resources and then get the right bumps in seats, lining up, like, okay, here you are going to be the person who's going to be sending out messages on Twitter, and you're going to be engaging with people on Facebook, and so on. The more that you can start to marshal those resources and get them get them in the right place in advance of your campaign, the better off you're going to be. The thing you don't want to do is to be trying to figure out what you're doing in your campaign and who's going to be doing it during your campaign, right? That's the worst. And we've seen many people, many organizations do that. So advance.
Or you just have one person do it all, so I knew. There's no issue on that. But no, having more people do it obviously is great. Having it done ahead of time is very important, but if it is one person, it's still good to let them know ahead of time. Because I actually had a schedule of the messages that I was going to be delivering on a daily breakdown ahead of time prior to the campaign started. Now, those changed obviously as things do, but at least I had something that I was starting off with. Yeah, so that would probably be the biggest thing that we would do differently if we decide to run another campaign. There are a couple of other things. Not spending as much money on our rewards. Even though quite a few of them were no cost, we bought tote bags to give away, and that was a fairly large expense for us. We covered the cost obviously, but it was something that's important. We also ran a party, which even though a lot of the cost was sort of covered, it kind of negated some of the. So basically, the costs. People who bought a ticket covered the cost of the party. And those are things that you're getting people excited about what you're doing, but the funds aren't necessarily going to be going directly to everything else. So it's a challenge to balance what rewards you have, and that's something you should be taking into consideration, because you can have a great event, but you have to realize that no great event is free. Even when you get a lot of things donated, there's always going to be a cost. And so we kind of had all these great ideas, and they worked out well, because obviously they resonated, people decided to support us. But some of the funds obviously didn't go towards helping us get more trees. They went actually towards helping us fulfill the redemption requirements. And as a not-for-profit, it's really important to remember that there's that cost. So it's great ideas, and so you have to weigh the pros and cons of that for your organization, what you've got in stock already. Charity receipts. We did not offer charity receipts, partially because the timing is you have to run the levels that you're going to do by the government, and when we have a month's time, it's not going to happen. So we did have some people asking for charity receipts, which we couldn't provide. You can actually have charity receipts through crowdfunding, but you need to go, there's additional steps that you need to take, assuming that you have the ability to offer charity receipts to begin with.
Can you tell us more about that? What are the steps that you have to take?
Well, my understanding, because we're actually affiliated with Tides, and Tides is where we get our charity receipts, so that would be something I would have actually been working with Tides with. But you have to talk to the CRA.
They have to approve your levels.
Yeah, and to approve the value of a receipt you're giving for the levels. So 100, maybe the free stuff probably would have been equal value because there was no cost for us. We probably wouldn't have been able to give a receipt for the bag or a receipt for $15 because the bag is valued at $5. We would need to get that approval ahead of time from the government. And then you would have to ensure that back end, at the other end, you'd be able to actually deliver all of the receipts. Because that's not something I don't think platforms will deliver for you, so that's something that your staff would have to take on as well. So there's again, people may have been more willing to if they were able to get the receipts, but then there's more work for you to do at the other end as well. So again, balancing what you're getting and what you're putting in is really important because there is a lot of work. You can get great rewards, but you do need to make sure that you're not putting out more work than you're getting back. PR. We did not leverage PR as much as we would have liked. And that's something, if we went forward, we would definitely try to do a little bit more PR. I know I was having some meetings with Chris, and he had a great suggestion, but it was too late when he gave it, so we couldn't do it. But he suggested midway through the campaign, actually having a mini event that would get the press excited. So maybe we could have had a pick in the middle of the campaign with one of our celebrities. The press would have probably covered it. Like you throw David Miller in, people love David Miller, or they hate David Miller. Whoever, the press will, if David Miller is getting probably something covered. And then that would have generated some buzz around our campaign, and then we could have carried that forward for the remainder of the campaign. So that would be one way, that's a good PR tactic to use. There's all sorts of other sorts of PR tactics that you can use without actually engaging a PR company. So I would have probably tried to engage that a little bit more. We did send press releases and such as you do, but we had some traction, but I would like to kind of play that angle. And after the campaign, so once your campaign is at 0 hours, you breathe a sigh of relief, it's done. It's not done. You have to get, you will keep in touch with your donors. It's really important. Some of these people may not have engaged with your organization before, so sending a thank you saying, we've raised this amount of money. Somebody may have given you $20 at the beginning of the campaign and just sort of forgotten about it. Sending them a note to say, with your help, thank you, we were able to raise all of this money, we're able to meet our goal. And then afterwards, once the money's been used, say, thanks to you, we were able to do X, whatever it is you're raising your funds for. Because you want to engage them on how they engaged you. Then you can also engage them as you engage all your donors, but play around with them specifically is also a good idea. Celebrate your successes with all your network, because if you're able to raise your money or raise a little bit more, people like to hear about that. It's great. It's great. It's a good news story. And amidst all of your asking for money because it's not for profits, you're always just like, here, why don't you support us? You can actually say, hey, we did this. Bravo. You guys helped us. Sharing that's really good. And then budget lots of time for reward redemption. Not only just to send it out, but you may have people, because you've now got a whole group of people that hadn't been part of your network before potentially, they may have questions, they may take your time, and there's nothing the matter with that, but you need to make sure that you realize that it's not, the relationship doesn't just stop with the donation, which is pretty universally true for all donations, and you just need to remember that that also is true for the crowdfunding.
In fact, that's what you want, right? You want that relationship to continue, so you want to build that into your plan.
Yeah. And that's it.
When's your next one?
we're in discussions to see whether it's something that we want to be doing again, because there was a lot of work, but we did get a lot of good things out of it, so it's great.
It's kind of a question for both of you in relation to that. Is it a common practice to have recurring crowdfunding or crowdsourcing campaigns for charities and nonprofits? And if not, why not?
Yeah.
And so why?
Go ahead.
You can go.
Yeah, so the question is about why. Oh, sorry. Hello. So the question is it common for charities to have recurring crowdfunding campaigns? And what I would say is, beginning, yes, that now as charities and nonprofits are engaging with the tool, what I would strongly encourage you to think about is how can we locate the value that we're creating and magnify its impact, or magnify the how can I create more value? So, for example, in Whelena's campaign, we discovered two major things. One was the reward that you were offering for the charity beer had a huge amount of traction, and the other thing was the celebrity picks, right? Those two things were like wow. I remember the celebrity pick with David Miller, that went incredibly quickly, and presumably was a good experience for him as well as the other people that that were there. So now you've found a place of value, so now it's important to say, okay, well, we've created this value, we know the value is here, how can we magnify this value? Let's follow that like a thread and try to make that bigger, make the pie even bigger. What you don't want to do is just sort of each time do the same thing and not have anything new, because what you'll find is you'll run into the same problem that you find with classical donations, which is donor fatigue, right? You'll end up having that same exact issue. So if you continue to think more on the sort of the social enterprise side of how do I build value, how do I create additional value, how do I do something that is novel and interesting, then I think you'll have much greater success.
Yeah, and just to add to that, one of the things that at the onset of our campaign there was a lot of discussion about was the level that we were going to try and achieve. And the reason why we selected the 4,000 was because there was a chance that we would be doing it again. So if we had gone for a bigger stretch goal, we would have potentially been tapping out all the people. And if we want to take them again, it's a lot easier to do it at a smaller level. Because if you, as you know, with donors, some people, if you keep on asking them for huge stretch goals, you're not likely to be successful. But we wanted to have a success story, so we sort of tried to set it up with it in a success story manner. But if we did go back, we didn't pull everybody's teeth out to get the money and then go and ask them. Instead, we're saying, hey, we were able to raise this, we actually were able to raise more. So it will be easier, a better story for next year if we do it.
And that story part is really, really critical.
Yeah.
Was the 4,000 for a specific event, or was it just kind of, we're trying to raise general funds?
We were trying to, it was sort of general funds specifically to allow for more manpower to organize more picks. Because although we have volunteers going out to do the picks, we do have paid staff organizing it because we have to go to the, I had no idea how much work was involved in getting it. It sounds like, oh, it should be very simple. But we actually go and we vet the trees, to determine whether it works or not. There's the scheduling because the call outs go out and then who gets it, who doesn't, making sure that everything is managed properly. So there's a lot of back end work. So it was not a glamorous, I guess, fundraising goal, like the purpose, but it's certainly like what we were doing was in people, so that worked in our favor. So we didn't really spin the story of how it was going to be back end work. Yeah, it was more like we're going to save trees, we're going to save the fruit. That's how we spun that. But when people asked, we told them that people understand obviously how many of us have spent way too much time staring at Excel spreadsheets. Well, that's sort of what we were trying to allow more time for.
I think we have a question from the internet.
Yes, so Rona from, actually, I don't know what it stands for, Women's Rights and Development, she's asking for the both of you if crowdfunding campaigns can be posted in different languages, and if so, would you suggest that?
Oh, wow, excellent question. So the question is, can crowdfunding campaigns be posted in different languages, and is that something that we would recommend? That's something being based here in Toronto, which being a global hub, we think is fantastic, and we're actively working on right now. Is it a good idea? I would certainly say that if your crowdfunding campaign is going to be reaching out to a particular audience, and that audience happens to speak in a particular language, then certainly that can be an appropriate thing to do. You want to continually think about who is it that's going to support my crowdfunding campaign, and what is important to them. And if they're having it in a certain language or with certain elements in your campaign, if that's important to them, then I would certainly say absolutely you want to include that.
Yeah, but I would, and the multiple language thing, I think it would also potentially result in you running multiple campaigns because you'd have to be communicating to people in those different languages. So it's not necessarily a bad thing, but that would probably have to be put into your budget for time as well, because if you've got something in Arabic, you probably want to be talking to people in Arabic about it, as well as in English. So that there may be ways of minimizing that, but it would be something definitely to take into consideration, because don't just have it on there, nobody's going to go. So you need to drive in there, and you probably would be right if you're writing it in a different language, probably communicating everything to that. But
yeah,
do you have anything else to add?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just I think it's a matter of like this just comes back to then the planning part of your campaign. So there's, I mean, if this was a campaign that you wanted to run under your own brand, then we could talk to you about that, and there could be some technological things that could be done. But otherwise, yeah.
She says thanks.
Okay. You're welcome.
Yeah, one more question. Chris and I, we are planning environmental sustainability project. So we're not, having an organization right now, but it seems to me that a lot of the campaigns are run by non-profit organizations or charities. But is it would that be different or very difficult for kind of project-based operation, or have to be, or it's better to be an organization to do it?
Okay, yeah, very good question. Is it better to be an organization, or is it better to be sort of project-based?
Yeah.
So what I would say is, even if you're an organization, it is often best to be project-focused in what it is that you're doing. When people, earlier on I was putting up sort of those 4 principal things that people connect with, the mission of what you're doing is critically important. What we found with Not Far From the Tree was people got it right away. Like when they saw the pitch, they heard it and they were like, yeah, like duh, it's just gonna rot there. Let's do something good with it. This is smart and important and something I want to participate in. In fact, I remember being out separate places and hearing about your crowdfunding campaign as we were, as just in the course of our public speaking and talks and so on. So you want that mission to be really focused. The other advantage is, you were asking earlier about can you do multiple campaigns? Well, if you're an organization and you're doing this project and that runs and you do that successfully, well, there's nothing wrong with coming back and saying, okay, well now we're doing a different project and and people will be very interested and engaged and supportive as long as there's value there to then support that other initiative. And in fact, then you're building up your own credibility and your reputation as an organization that is delivering successfully on multiple projects. You have like a story that's there. You can envision the Globe and Mail article.
So if it's just a project, because we are not there for establishing the organization yet. So if we start just as a project, are there some tips for that? Suggestions for that?
Yeah, the question is if you start as a project, are there other sort of tips of that if you're sort of pre-organization? What I would say is be transparent, like be who you are and be where you are. And what we see is with crowdfunding is that authenticity, that level of ultra transparency resonates with people. Like when people gave to the lady who was bullied, they gave because they understood and they were like, this sucks and I want to support you. When people gave to the Rob Ford crack starter campaign, that resonated with them. They were like, I am going to vote with my dollars for transparency and accountability. Hopefully that's what they were voting for. But there was something very real about that. And so it is okay to be gritty, it is okay to be real, it's okay to be transparent and be authentic where you are and to say, hey, we're thinking we might start an organization and we're doing this campaign because, that's where we'd like it to go ultimately, but this is where we are right now. We need your help getting started. And there's nothing wrong with that. People will connect with that. That's really where you're at.
And I can speak a little bit to the project as well, because I was involved with Cultivate Toronto. We raised funds for a specific project, the organization, not the organization as a whole. So the communication was around the project. And Cultivate Toronto is a very small organization, so it wasn't really competing with our other messaging as well. But you can do things not the organization. And the project actually is easier to come up with a compelling story for typically than the organization. That was something that we started a little bit with the Not Far From the Tree, so we focused on the Not Far From the Tree story. But a project, typically, there's a reason why you're doing the project. And that's the story. You've got your story. You need to finesse the messaging around that, but there's a reason why you want to do it. And that makes it easier than saying, well, this is why we're doing this. You're far more focused, your messaging can be more concise, and you can probably run a great pitch and hope for it. Sorry.
Just a question about leveraging third parties to do your fundraising for you. I know that our organization has been trying to find a way to use a platform to have other people doing fundraising for us. Is there a model like the platform with, say, the CSI Catalyst, where people can sign up to do crowdsourcing on your behalf, crowdsourcing or crowdfunding on your behalf?
Yeah, very good question. The question is, are there solutions or opportunities out there for people to, via crowdsourcing, to get other people to do fundraising on your behalf? Yeah, there absolutely are. There are ways to do it. We're interested in talking with organizations who are interested in that functionality. And there is one. Oh my gosh, the name completely escapes me at this moment. I will be happy to find it for you if you email me afterwards when we talk. And so more organizations are looking at that. Earlier on, one of the slides that I put up around crowdsourcing, one of the highlights was crowd labor. And that idea of engaging with the crowd to try to recruit those volunteers, that's a smart strategy, right? That's saying, how can we use the crowd to help us achieve our mission rather than just saying like, oh my God, if only I had 100 more people in my organization, right? So that's a great approach.
I think the term friend-to-friend fundraising is friend-to-friend fundraising will get you a lot of those platforms. People like that.
Cool.
Just out of curiosity, how lean is your organization? Because I'm thinking I deal with other organizations that sometimes everything's got to go through the board, and that can take months.
Well, I mean, if you're referring for Not Far From the Tree, fairly lean. We also had pretty open guidelines from the steering committee. If you have an organization where you do have a lot of strict controls, ensure you budget time for that. It's just, I've worked with organizations that the layers of stuff that you have to go through, it's like, how do you get anything done? you have to plan a lot, and you have to push really hard because you have to have an understanding of when you need that information. Push really hard to get it, and hopefully In that case, I would recommend kind of coming up with a list of key messages and have them all approved at once. So go at them with as much information up front so you can get your approval so they're not bogged down when the campaign is running. Because you certainly don't want to post something and then have one of the board members go, "What did you do?" Because once it's out there, it's out there. So you definitely want to make sure, and that's when that's getting the full organizational involvement is very important, because if they've got the buy-in, then it'll be a lot easier and they'll work for you, not against you. Any questions?
So, thank you so much to both of you for joining us. This was really helpful. I'm sure they'll be around for a couple minutes afterwards if you would like to chat more with them in person or talk more to Not Far From the Tree about their experience. So just wanted to thank everyone for coming. We will be sending out a quick survey if you have feedback or suggestions for next time after the event. And also we'll be sending out the recap of the event, and I said the recording, all that stuff, in about a week. So keep an eye on your inbox for that. And thank you so much to both of our speakers.